Hey everyone, this video in this tutorial is dealing more with the Desmos calculator. We're going to look specifically at the graphing side of it. So not as much on that left-hand home screen, but on the graph and the features that are in there and how you can manipulate it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to log in. Remember that this is a really good feature that if you don't have it, you want to set it up. Use your school account. That's the easiest to work with since it then feeds into things. That way I can save things on the side. I can create things. Your teacher can actually create something in there and send it to you if you have an account set up. If you don't, you're not going to be able to access it. Now, your graph is going to start on a 10 to negative 10 on the x and just about 7 to negative 7 on the y. About 6.5 to negative 6.5 is the standard window that shows up. Now let's say I want to make some changes to that window. I'm going to go to the graph settings. That's the wrench on the far side. Let me turn off the toolbar here because I don't need them. So this allows me to have a projector mode. I can't say if that's really helpful. You'll notice it just changes the size of the boxes. I don't really care about that. It also has what's called Braille mode. It has reverse contrast. I don't see that personally as useful. If you do, that's up to you. It just makes the background black and all the font white. I don't find that to be the most helpful, but that's up to you. Braille mode also not very useful. Uh, you're not feeling this screen, but there are different modes that allow you to set up some of the stuff in Braille. You'll see down below the Braille popping up, and it has what's called an input in Braille. Not very useful here. You can't feel the screen again. Now, grid tells you whether it's in Cartesian, so rectangular grid, or polar grid. This can do polar graphing. Some of the higher courses will definitely deal with polar graphing. This is possible. It also allows you to have arrows on the ends, and it allows you to make it just a quadrant 1. So you'll notice if I turn it off, the arrows are only in the quadrant 1. Sort of when you make things like your bar graphs and histograms, they're in quadrant 1, or all 4, but it's not really necessary. Now you have your axes numbers, so I can turn the numbers on and off. I would always leave them on. And then minor grid lines. If I turn this off, I only have whether the steps that I'm on. I like the minor because it allows you to look a little bit closer. Now you have X and Y axis. You can make a label for this. I can call the X axis, I don't know, time we use a lot. And you'll see when I turn it off, it says time over on the right. I can call this, frequency, and it will be on the top. I'm going to ignore that. I don't tend to do that much. If you're going to make a graph in here that you're then going to cut and paste into a document, then you might want to draw labels on here. Now, this is our scale. Right now, I have no steps, which means as I zoom in and out, now if you zoom it all and hit home, it will bring you back to that original, or if I drag the screen around, it will keep this scale. If I zoom in, it'll then go to by ones and then by halves, and then it will keep converting from there. But I can force it to look different. I can say I want to go from negative 10 to 10, and let's say I want the y to also go from negative 10 to 10, which tends to be what your calculator looks like. And I can choose a step. That's a scale mark. That's what we're going by. I want to go by ones with each of these. Or I can say I want to go by twos. Twos. They don't have to be the same, but you can make that adjustment. Now at the very bottom it says radians and degrees. Like most calculator technology, it's set to radians automatically. If you are in the test mode of Desmos, I believe it's automatically set to degrees. This only really matters if you're starting to do some of the stuff in geometry and trigonometry where you're dealing with angle measures. So especially polar graphing, it's going to be very important that you have it set in the right mode, otherwise it won't calculate right. And this affects the calculation more than the actual graph. If I have this set up for polar graphing, so here's my polar graph, and notice it has pi as part of the labels. That's because it's in radian measure. If I convert it to degrees, it'll convert to degrees. That's very important for polar graphing. Most of the time we're going to do polar graphing in radian mode because it's just easier to work with. Now let's take a look at, and we're going to stretch this back to where it was. Home will always bring it back to this preset. Now, let's say I make a simple graph. Let's just do a simple line, so 2x plus 1. You don't have to put y equals. You can y equals if you want. It does not matter. It will not affect it. Once this is in here, if I click this button on the left, it turns it off without deleting it. The gear will let you make more changes. For example, you'll see there's a table. I can convert this equation into a table. I can duplicate it to another line, but you can cut and paste. You can copy and paste. If I convert to table, it's now a table. I can undo that. So let's go into the gear. This allows me to choose a different style of line, dashed and dotted, or different colors. Normally it'll start in the top left and then the next one will go to the next color and it'll just rotate through. It will never rotate line type, but it will rotate, and then we click done. X always deletes it. So let's say I want to do 2x squared plus 1. So that takes the line and bends it. Remember, as the powers increase, 2x to the third plus 1, it all stays at that 1, but notice the color rotates, and if I look at that color palette, it rotates through the colors. I don't know how it decides what color to use, but it tends to pick them. You can make them yourself. Now, one thing that is possible with this is to add in what are called sliders. A slider allows you to manipulate the numbers manually. Now, X and Y are never sliders. They're X and Y. You need them for the graph. But let's say that I convert, let's get rid of these, let's just get rid of these other ones. I don't need them. Let's say I convert the 2 and I want to make it an A, and I make this a B. So we're using those. X, remember, is your independent value. You are going to replace it with numbers, but it's an infinite amount. A and B are our constants, and I can say all, and I've just made them sliders. They're starting at 1. Now notice they're going from -10 to 10, but I can change that. Let's say I want to limit it. I don't need to look that far. -10 to 10 is pretty far. So this is our slope. So let's say we limit this. Let's make it go from just -2 to 2. And step allows you to, again, say by what. I'm going to ignore that for now. And let's say we go here. I don't need it to go all the way down to, let's say -2 to 2 again, just so that we keep it in more of a limit. So now I've got these sliders. I can grab the slider and I can rotate like this, and notice the number changes. And I can move it and slide it up and down. And it's using this original equation to calculate what that line will look like based on how you put it. Notice there's a dot, and that dot is at its starting point, which in this case was is the 0. It gives you the middle of the whole thing, which is usually your 0. Now, whenever you click on the actual graph, it will do a couple of things. It will mark your intercepts, always. And if you click on that, it labels it, it spins it. So now when I move somewhere else, it doesn't disappear. Otherwise, it would, pop up, but then go away when you moved away. So if you're looking for intercepts, every intercept will be marked, every single one. Now, if they're really close together, it may not show up, and you've got to zoom in to take a look at it. Now, if I leave them pinned and move this, they go away, and then I would have to go back and click on them again. It's it's a limit, it's a label. Now, you can create labels that will stay with it, though. As you move things, they move with it, but not the normal one that's there. And if you hold down anywhere on that line, it tells you the ordered pair of where you're at out a certain amount of decimal places. So it does have that feature there. Now, one thing that this does not do is it does not round. If you go into the system here, it has steps written in, but it doesn't have a way to round your values. So you got to do that on your own. You got to remember your rounding rules. Let's add a power in here. Let's square this. Notice it stayed the same. I can adjust, and notice it moves it around. There are ways to set up things where I can actually grab the graph and move the graph. Right now, all I'm doing is moving a dot on the graph. I can't actually move the graph from here. Even if I click on, and notice I'm clicking on one of the intercepts and trying to move it, and it won't do it. There are ways to set up stuff in the home screen to let you do that, but that requires you to do a bit of programming, and if you want to look at that, you can do that. That's fine. Notice I can adjust this to whatever power I want, and then these work. Now, if I go into the gear for this, I can still convert this into a table. It will only go from the x's we set, the range that we set, or domain in this case, -2 to 2, is what it will automatically fill in, and then it will give you only those points. This is a continuous graph, so a table's not really the most useful thing, but it is an option. It can do that. So this gives you some of the basic graphing features that are there. Again, you can give it a title, save it. That way you always have that graph if you need to. That's what that's for. You'll see that I have other graphs already built into this, and then there are some that came with Desmos that you can access even without signing in. But if you do sign in, even if you switch to another computer and you go to Desmos, you'll always be able to find that. So hopefully this will give you a bit of a jumping off point on the graphing side. There will be videos dealing with more specifics like maybe polar graphing. We'll do one of those later on, and more math-based than technology-based. But those features are here, and you just got to play around with them.